Hey there, Agile Adventurer. Just a quick question. What if, for the price of a fancy coffee or half a pizza, you could unlock over 700 hours of the best Agile content on the planet? That's audio, video, e-courses, books, presentations, all that you can think of. But you can also join live calls with world-class practitioners and hang out in a flame war-free and AI slop-clean Slack with the sharpest minds in the game. Oh, and yes, you get direct access to me, Vasco, your Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. No, this is not a drill. It's the Scrum Master Toolbox membership. And it's your unfair advantage in the Agile world. So if you want to know more, go check out scrummastertoolbox.org/membership. That's scrummastertoolbox.org/membership. And check out all the goodies we have for you. Do it now. But if you're not doing it now, let's listen to the podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Wednesday, the coaching day here on the podcast. And with us this week, we have Alidad Hamidi. Hey, Alidad, welcome back.
Hey, Vasco.
So the coaching conversation is something we do with the guests where we discuss a specific topic and explore that topic, try to understand it as a system, and potentially talk about experiments that we might want to run in that condition. We try to bring real life situations that we face so that you listening can also take inspiration from that. Potentially you are in a similar situation, but also so that you can hear what a coaching conversation sounds like. So Alidad, let's start with the topic that you want to bring to us this week.
I wouldn't necessarily say this is the single biggest challenge right now because, coming from a system thinking background and complexity, there is never a single challenge. Like there's always a number of contributing factors. There's always situations. Sometimes we call them challenge. Sometimes we call them problem. But they're just situations. There's situations that is stopping us to achieve a more desirable outcome. So for me at the moment, one of the things that I'm working on is creating the balance between the organizational demand from a reporting structure, etc. perspective versus what the teams are actually they need to do, and also the transformation they need to, apart from doing their day-to-day job, the transformation they need to make at the same time to further develop their capability to be more fit for the changed environment. What I mean by that is we have some standard models and frameworks and operating models that we're helping the organization to, for the lack of better, to roll out and for teams to adopt. But there is so much emphasis on standardization, and then the teams as well as people involved with the transformations are measured by certain things, like simple things like the being measured by and they're not bad measures, right? But it's just they're not context sensitive. So let's say we have things like flow time. Every team has to have flow time below a certain number. Every team have to have certain velocity. Velocity is not necessarily measured by a story point. It's not traditional velocity. It's velocity as in how much value they're delivering. Things like that, right? So creating the balance between there is this demand from the leaders that your metrics should look like this versus in actual work, what teams need to do to improve their work is something else, right? How do you create that balance? Because
that's a very good question. So I want to break that into two parts. The first part is the metrics and how they frame everything that we can see. And then the second part is that contrast, perhaps even conflict between attending to the standards we are being asked to follow versus attending to the actual work that needs to be done. And I want to use the garden metaphor. You introduced the idea of flowers in the previous episode where, kind of the basic metaphor is that if a flower is not growing as much as you would expect, then the problem is in the system around the flower, not in the flower itself. Yeah. And one problem with metrics is that it precludes the ability to see the system because it narrows down the focus on this very specific aspect. And I read a book quite a while back by John C. Scott called Seeing Like the State, where he catalogs, meaning he describes many examples of how this top-down imposition of metrics on a system actually makes the system worse, less adaptable, more brittle. And when we think about adaptability, so the environment is changing, the market is changing, when we do top-down, what typically happens is that we prevent the system from adapting, right? Like one example that you gave, let's call it the flow. Anyone who understands anything about theory of constraints or lean processes would say, but that's a great metric. Why wouldn't you look at it? And
Yes.
I would agree in abstract, but then let's go into the practice. Let's imagine a team that needs to attain a certain level of flow. If they are not attaining that level of flow, then they have a conundrum. Do I optimize for the flow, or do I optimize for solving the problem I really have in my hands? So how are you managing that conversation? Because I'm sure it's coming up all the time.
I think that's a really good one. Like I said, this is something I think about it almost every day. I think one of the ways I could help the system to live with that polarity is, first of all, I'll make it very visible to the leaders. Deming have a good point about if you set the metrics, or if you set targets for the people, they will achieve the target even if that means destroying the system around them. Right? And that's very unhealthy. It's natural human behavior. There is nothing to blame there. The only thing to blame is the people who set those targets, right? But I think when I come from a more empathetic perspective from the leaders, let's say, what is it that you want to achieve by these metrics, right? Then I think that's one thing. So by understanding what they want to achieve, I think I can facilitate a better conversation on, we can help you achieve those in a different way. And I've had quite a lot of success with them. So when you go and talk to the right level of leadership and you have that conversation, when you go past that, the corporate thing, and this is what everyone have to do, say, look, I really want us to do this, and I want the engagement of the team to achieve this and that. So, well, what if we do that, but some of our metrics drop? Well, it's not ideal, but that's what I want. Surprisingly, the leaders want that as well. Right? So that's one way to kind of understand the intent. Number two is, which is the typical, coach response is, I actually asked the team. I said, look, guys, we need to achieve these numbers. We don't want to spend too much time on achieving them. I call it sometimes, although I don't encourage it, but I call it, the tax to pay, or the license to play, right? So I said, well, there's a tax. We need to do a little bit of this extra work to achieve these numbers. But really, if we create value for our customers, if they are happy, and if the team dynamic is right, if we have the right performance, those metrics, we could have it. And you know what? This is a surprising reaction I got from the system. Not out of them, the moment we have that conversation, most of those other metrics improve as well.
Yeah, so I can totally see how bringing a more adaptable perspective to the team, right? The tax to pay, the license to play, as you describe it, it kind of makes it playful. It doesn't make it like a top-down imposition of something bad, right? Like it tries to incorporate it in a way that can become, I would say that the inefficiency of the metric can be absorbed by the team. I get that, and it makes perfect sense. I do worry about the other aspect, which is that flow metrics, or cycle time, lead time, throughput at a team level is actually quite useless from understanding and optimizing the overall goal of the organization. So the other thing that I worry is about these metrics that are applied to a specific point in the overall organization. So it could be an individual or a team or even a subset of teams that can, and by design, they will sooner or later have a negative impact in some other part. But that negative impact in some other part is not going to be visible. So for example, one team can be optimizing for throughput, which affects flow time, but by them having to optimize for throughput, let's call it the QA team, optimizing for throughput, they are not going to help the developers, the development team, achieve their goals. They're going to make it harder for the development team to achieve their goals, therefore affecting the flow time of the development team. So what kind of thoughts and ideas have you brought to the organization to kind of bring that topic of the overall performance rather than the team level or individual level performance?
Yeah, I mean, this is specific case. Let me add this context. They are in a really kind of they're in the kind of fifth evolution of agile transformation and agile adoption, right? So they have been significant amount of time spent in the last couple of years to structure the organization in a way that teams are aligned to value streams. I think we've kind of removed a lot of that. It's effectively the teams are part of value streams, and that part of design is already done, right? And most of our metrics are kind of end-to-end metrics. So I just want to add that they've gone to that process of optimizing for team versus understanding the value streams. That's a whole different conversation I'd like to have later, maybe, because I think even value streams are not necessarily the best tool for us. Because imagine you have the analogy I use is the difference between Toyota production line versus a Pixar Studio, right? So the metrics that apply to Toyota production line, if you're applying the same metric, if you're applying lean metrics to your Pixar Studio, you're gonna kill Pixar Studio. Vice versa, if you apply the approaches and method of Pixar Studio to production line, they will go bankrupt in less than a month, right? So I think being context sensitive is quite important. None of them are by itself or bad things, but if you apply these metrics approaches, whether it's lean, agile, or any other approach you take, if you see them as universal laws that apply everywhere, then that's the failure. But if you see them as context sensitive, depending on the team, depending on the evolution of the environment, the organization, evolution of the market, a big part of open system theory is also you start external, you start from outside in versus inside out. A lot of organizational transformation that they fail, and even beyond agile, not just agile, is they have such an inward looking. They try to optimize everything. And I say, well, what are you optimizing for? If you got to start from outside in, you want to start from not even customer. You have to start from broader environment, then industry, then customer, and only they start thinking about your products and value streams. Even then, I think we've reached to a point that the paradigm is now beyond product now. I think I see a lot of product operating model gaining a lot of traction. I think product paradigm by itself is probably it finished 10 years ago, right? So now we are into scenario based and ecosystem business model where there isn't a single product. Customers are part of the broader ecosystem and they team multiple products for different scenario of their life to use your product. So if you're focusing on your product only, remember that your product is a tiny bit of a broader scenario that the customer is trying to use in their life. The only model that help you succeed in that is if you use customer scenarios plus ecosystem model. When you open up your business and you start interacting with other players, even your competitors, in the broader ecosystem.
And that's actually a very good point, and I think a huge topic for another episode, this ecosystem perspective of business. If you would wrap up this conversation, Alidad, what do you think are kind of the key insights from your own experience and the issues, the topics that you're struggling with right now? What are the key insights that you would want our listeners to take away?
I think if we talk specifically about, so that's a very broad question, by the way, but if we bring it back to to your first question and the challenge that I raised, I think, look, remember, organizations are very large, very complex, right? It takes, even if you look at the nature, it takes a long time for things to evolve. You have to allow, you either have a platform on fire or a visionary leader or chance that you can make a lot of change in a short amount of time, which probably is not even a good thing. Or you have to accept the fact that the organization goes through these learning cycles. It takes a long time for a large organization to change its behavior. Even a single individual, right? We drink coffee a lot in Australia, right? So try to not drink coffee for a week. Even for a single person, one practice, it's very hard to change your behavior. Imagine for an organization of hundreds of thousands of people, or I don't know,
where
10,000, 20,000 people.
Where there are emerging behaviors that no single individual
Lots
even
of emerging
can
behavior, lots of external forces, systemic forces, internal systemic forces. So one of the things is be patient.
Yeah, that's definitely important.
Understand where the organization is in the life cycle. I don't want to justify bad behavior for a lot of leaders. There's certainly that. But look, I think what I find is if we take responsibility for our freedom, we'll always find ways to move the system, but it may not necessarily be with the speed that we expect. Right? Systems have their own rhythm and the speed.
Absolutely. And check out yesterday's episode where Alidad presents the book that helped him gain this perspective. Thank you for that, Alidad.
No problem. That was a great question.
All right, I hope you liked this episode. But before you hit next episode, here's the deal. This podcast is powered by people like you, the members who wanted more than just inspiration. They wanted real tools and real connection to people who are practicing Agile every day. We're talking access to over 700 hours of Agile Gold, CTO level strategy talks, summit keynotes, live workshops, e-courses, deep dive interviews, books, and if you're into no estimates, we got the pioneers of no estimates in those deep dive interviews as well. Agile business intelligence, creating product visions, coaching your product owner courses, you name it. You'll get invites to monthly live Q&As with Agile pioneers and practitioners, plus a private Slack community, which is free of all of that AI slop you see everywhere, and of course, without the flame wars. It's a community of practitioners that want to learn and thrive together. It's the best place to connect with community and learn together. So if this podcast has helped you before, imagine what you will get from this podcast membership. So head on over to scrummastertoolbox.org/membership and join the community that's shaping the future of Agile. And we have so much for you. So check out all the details at scrummastertoolbox.org/membership, because listening is great, it's important, but doing it together, that's next level. I'll see you in the community Slack. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.